you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came in to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came in to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K,
All in, we came in to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came in to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came in to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the fall!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro on this Friday, June 30th, the Sick Podcast, weeknights, 10 p.m., live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, named by the Financial Times as one of America's fastest growing companies in 2023, recognized by the Globe and Mail as a top growing Canadian company 2 years in a row. They work with some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies, providing end-to-end logistics services. Join a winning team and check out Energy's career page for available opportunities. Also, brewed in Quebec and a winner of a dozen international awards, Bittt at Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with some premium ingredients for everyone's taste. Bittt at Tibi, embrace your true nature. Also brought to you in part by Playground. Over 600 machines, poker tournaments, and Playground casino games, daily promotions, and unmatched customer service. Why go anywhere else? Located just over the Mercier Bridge, only minutes from downtown Montreal. We have a lot lined up tonight on the Sick Podcast because, of course, the selection of David Reinbacher still has a lot of people talking. The Montreal Canadiens draft in general has a lot of people talking. I'm going to get Stu Cowan's opinions on this. He's going to join me in about a minute or so. And also, very much looking forward to talking to Thibaud Chatel, who works analytics for NL Ice Data, a Swiss hockey stats website. And of course, we all know that David Reinbacher played in Swiss League. So we'll talk to him about that and what he thinks. Also, a tweet that caught my attention from a player who played versus Reinbacher to get his opinion. But with development camp around the corner, July 1st to July 4th, also opening of unrestricted free agency on July 1st. He covers the Habs 365 days a year from the Montreal Gazette newspaper and hockeyinsideout.com. Stu Cowan, how are you?
Hey, Tony, I'm doing okay. You're right. It is 365 days a year, it seems, and 7 days a week, 24 hours a day with the Habs in the city. People can't get enough about this team.
It's incredible to think that there's going to be a development camp July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Brossard, and we're going to be there and we're going to be covering it. I'm not going to go all 4 days, Stu, but I'm going to show my face there probably 2 days out of 4. I don't know what your plan is.
Yeah, well, they're only on it starts Saturday, but it's just off-ice testing or weigh-ins and whatnot. They're on the ice Sunday and Monday, starting at 9:15 with the goalies, then the players at 11:15, and then Tuesday there's a scrimmage at 11. So they're on the ice Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and it is open to the public for anybody who wants to go to Brossard and check it out.
Yeah, the plan for me is Monday and Tuesday, and I'll take this weekend off. But anyway, after working quite a bit during this NHL draft, we podcasted for 3 hours and 45 minutes, give or take, on Wednesday night and about an hour and a half last night. So tonight, I think we're going to be under an hour, but it's okay. We'll see how it goes. There's no shortage of things to talk about. Joel Teasdale and Denis Gurianov have not received qualifying offers. They're going to be able to test unrestricted free agency, as is Jonathan Drouin. No surprise, right?
No, I mean, Drouin, I wish Jonathan all the best moving forward. I think the best thing for him and for the Canadiens is to move on and have a fresh start. I imagine there'll be another NHL team will be giving him a chance. I mean, I think he was second or third in the Canadiens in assists last season, despite missing so many games. He needs another chance. And Gurianov wasn't, he had 5 goals in 23 games with the Canadiens. And that whole, I don't know if it factored into it at all, but that whole Pride Night thing at the Bell Center when he was the only guy who wouldn't wear the sweater, I'm sure Jeff Molson would have preferred not to have that happen. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but not shocking that the Canadiens have decided to not offer him. Doesn't mean they can still sign him if they wanted to, But I think Gurianov's days in Montreal are probably over, and the same with Jonathan Drouin.
Even before that, like you could tell, like he was in the doghouse type of thing, and it's just they didn't like his play away from the puck, and they didn't like his consistency or lack thereof. Mind you, he wasn't the only one in that category. I mean, a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans on social media over the past couple of days now getting wind that, you know, there's a couple of contracts that have been bought out by some pretty big name players in the National Hockey League, or guys that used to have a name. And Matt Duchene is the latest one, by the way. And people are saying, hey, why don't the Canadiens buy out contracts? Why don't they buy out Hoffman? Why don't they buy out Armia? Why aren't they buy out Brendan Gallagher as much as they love him?
Well, they're not in a rush, really. The Canadiens don't have to. Like they're still part of this rebuild, and we carry that dead cap money forward. I was looking at Cap Friendly earlier today and realized that, you know, Carl Alzer still has one more year left on his buyout. You know, buyouts hurt you moving forward. So Canadians, they'd rather move these guys or trade these guys, even if they don't get much in return, whether it's before the season starts or at the trade deadline. So one thing I really admired about Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton since they took over is they don't rush, they don't panic, they have a long-term plan, and they're sticking to their long-term plan. They think long-term, it makes more sense not to buy guys out than to buy them out, and I have to agree with that.
Stu, I want to get back to the draft if I can. Look, I said this, that I've always been a guy who likes offense, right? I mean, everything I do is on the attack. I mean, that's just the way I am. I'm more of an offensive guy than a defensive guy. You know, we talk about the Canadiens, and my first idol, Montreal Canadiens idol, was Lafleur, offensive star, that is. And you know, I didn't even watch his best years. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, it was Stéphane Richer. And then in the 2000s, out of all the forwards they had, I mean, the guy who, you know, I really liked more than the others was Kovalev. So on that note, I'm always looking to add offensive players. But I see no shame in your first pick being the guy that is identified by most as the best defenseman in the draft. I don't have a problem with that. It's a question of mentality, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously David Reinbacher is a heck of a hockey player. He wouldn't have been picked 5th overall. He would have been rated the top defenseman in the draft. As I wrote in my column, just sort of this, you know, what you were saying, you know, you like offense, you like Kovalev and these guys and Lafleur. You're like the typical Montrealer. This city likes to be entertained. This city likes excitement, and the Canadiens haven't been exciting for so long. You know, I was writing the column yesterday. You know, they haven't had a player average a point a game since Kovalev in 2007-08. They haven't had a 40-goal scorer since Vinny Damphousse in 93-94. They haven't had a 50-goal scorer since Richer in 89-90. They haven't had a top 10 guy in scoring since Mats Naslund in 1986, which they happened to win the Cup that year also. And, you know, Nick Suzuki led the Canadiens in scoring last season. He ranked 73rd in the NHL. So as I wrote my column, it was just I understand David Reinbacher and, you know, Kent Hughes 5 years from now might be laughing at us who were wondering why he would have taken him instead of a forward. I understand the hesitation maybe with Mitchkov and some of the red flags that were up there. I didn't really buy Hughes as saying his main red flag that they've only watched them on video. They haven't watched them live. Okay, I mean, there's other guys that maybe they haven't watched live that much either. For me personally, if I was Kent Hughes and I had the number 5 pick, I would have taken Ryan Leonard. I think there's less red flags there out of the U.S. National Development Team program, like Cole Caulfield. The guy scored 51 goals in 57 games last year, 6 foot, 192 pounds, a right winger. Maybe you could play with Suzuki and Caulfield as a line mates. On a team that has struggled. I mean, the biggest problem with the Canadiens for so long is they can't score 5-on-5 and they can't score on the power play. So for me, if it was me, I would have been looking to get an offensive player, somebody who can put the puck in the net besides just Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki to a lesser extent. So to me, the more guys you have who you can't teach guys how to score goals. Goal scorers are basically born goal scorers, or there's goal scorers from a very young age. And when you have a chance to get one or two between Mitchkov and Leonard, and you pass on both to take a defenseman, and as I said, Reinbacher is obviously a great player. I would have gone for the offense, like you were saying, and especially in this market, people want to be entertained when they go to the Bell Center. They want to see guys score goals, and I think that's why so many fans on social media and that have been upset, because they want to be entertained when they go to the Bell Center. And Cole Caulfield has given them a taste of that, a big taste of that, and also made them realize maybe how long it's been since we've had that in Montreal. So to have another guy with the goal scoring abilities close to or up there with Cole Caulfield, I think would have been exciting for this team.
The only thing I think about in terms of Leonard, and obviously he's a real good hockey player, and 1/3 of that line with Will Smith and with Perreault, is this kid hails from Northampton, Massachusetts, right? And he's an 05 birth date. I mean, Kent Hughes, the 04 and 05 birth dates from the state of Massachusetts, he knows them like the back of his hand.
Yeah.
And so, I'll have confidence in Kent there. The whole thing with Michkov, they heard things about attitude issues. I understand all of that. There's a worry that he's under contract for 3 years. I understand that. There's a worry that he might extend his contract, and I understand all of that. The only thing that left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth is the whole, if Reinbacher shot left, it may have changed our opinion on this. And
you just took the words out of my mouth, Tony.
I think that's something that that slipped out of their mouth that they probably shouldn't have said, because they've always talked to us about best player available. And there's no doubt that Reinbacher's a good player, but it leads you to believe, hearing that he's a good player who's a safe pick, who plays the right position. And because the Canadians don't have many right-handed defensemen, and yes, they have Mailloux, and yes, they have Barron and Kovacevic, but because he fills a need and he's a safe pick, that's the reason why they went with him. I got that feeling. Did you not get that feeling?
I did, and I wasn't in Nashville, but kudos to Arpon Basso of The Athletic, who questioned Hughes on that exact topic at his news conference. And that's another thing. So if Reinbacher had shot left, then you would have taken Michkov or Leonard? Like, that was a deciding factor? I mean, I understand there's a real perk having a right-hand defenseman, and they're hard to find, and big, tall, lanky right-hand defensemen are hard to find. The Canes are short on that side. But if that was a determining factor between getting a defenseman and getting a guy who can score goals, I had the same reaction as you, Tony. I was like, wow, that seems, drafting by position. We saw that in the past, with Mike McCarron. The only reason they drafted him is because they wanted a big centerman and they picked him. It's to me, that was when Hughes said that, I was like, I hope that wasn't the last thing they said when they were in that meeting. Okay, do we take Reinbacher or do you take Michkov or Leonard? And somebody said, well, Reinbacher shoots right. And they said, okay, well, we're going to take Reinbacher.
Yeah. The other thing that's a little bit, it could be very encouraging. At the same time, it could be a little bit of a red flag, is when they say there was no argument whatsoever.
Yeah.
All of our scouts were all in accordance. We were all going with Reinbacher. Now, it could very well mean that Reinbacher is amazing and he's the real deal, and we all hope he is. And I know Thibaud Chatel is going to have some really good things to say about him, and he seems like a fine young man, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. But this can go two ways. When everyone's in accordance, it's either because the player's a phenom, or buddies hire buddies, and nobody wants to not support their buddy or confront their buddy because they want to stay in that position for a very long time. And we've seen
that seemed to be the case with Bergevin, and you hope it's not the case with Hughes. And maybe maybe they did debate and guys disagreed, and then at the end they all said, okay, we're going to take that pick, which is what would happen. But if everybody agrees we're taking Connor Bedard number one, well, okay, obviously. But in this situation, if every single scout in the room agreed, you wonder if they are afraid to speak out differently than what the boss wants, type of thing. But
Stu, you know why I'm smiling?
Yeah.
You remember when I asked Bergevin about that in a press conference? I said, what's the story here? Don't you guys ever debate? And he's like, oh, Tony, we throw FUs all over the place. So sometimes we remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. So I'm thinking maybe Marty, the point, just at the end, they all agreed, okay, we'll take the guy. And even the guys who maybe argued, I'm sure there must have been guys in the room who spoke up about other guys that they wanted to take. And then at the end of the day, your boss is your boss. Then at the end of the day, if the boss says, this is what we're going to take, you go, okay, well, I made my point. You hope that's what happened. Yeah. And that probably is what happened. But you're right. I mean, I can see people, when your scout says everybody in the room agreed on this pick, that's not necessarily a good thing in any business. You don't want to have, in any corporate office, you don't want to have everybody just being yes man and agreeing with everything that the boss wants to do or says.
This is what I find very unfortunate now, Stu. And I know you and I have spoken openly about this, all right? you've never pretended to be a guy who knows the prospects like the back of his hand, and I've never pretended to be a guy who knows the prospects like the back of his hand. Okay,
and I've never pretended to be somebody who knows more about hockey than Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton and Marty St. Louis and all those guys either. It's our opinion.
Well, sometimes I do, so I won't say anything. But no, but we cover the Montreal Canadiens 365 days a year. We podcast, we write, we report, we do television, we do radio, we do this, we do that. We do a lot of things. We don't have time to go to Drummondville, Victoriaville, London, Ontario, this, that, whatever, to scout. What we do is we watch some pretty big tournaments, and we watch the World Juniors. We watch highlights on YouTube. We talk to a lot of scouts. We talk to a lot of scouts with independent agencies. We take a look at some of these great people that are doing great work in stats and analytics and stuff like that. We talk to some agents, but the agents, of course, they can be pretty biased if they're talking about their player. We try and gather as much information as we can, and then we try and formulate an opinion.
And we formulate our opinion, exactly.
Correct. Okay. What's very unfortunate in all of this is that, for the most part, social media has not seen Michkov play.
No.
And social media has not seen Reinbacher play.
No.
And yet, Reinbacher, to hear that he's received hate messages or death threats or this or that because he was chosen ahead of Michkov, first of all, this is not the kid's fault. Second of all, why ruin this moment for him? Third of all, folks, it's just a game. Please stop. This is not life or death. And fourth of all, it doesn't matter where you're drafted. It matters how you end up playing.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. That's Shane Wright's dad told him that at the draft last year when they had him mic'd up after he went fourth instead of first. Doesn't matter where you go. It's what you do once you get there. And I feel so bad for David Reinbacher. I mean, what he's coming into here and that. But I did an interview earlier today with Newfoundland, CBC Newfoundland, and they were asking me about Alex Newhook. And they asked me, what's the best advice you can give Alex Newhook coming into Montreal? And I said, stay off social media. I had a long talk with Mike Matheson about that last season. And Mike Matheson never looks on Facebook or social media or Twitter. He said sometimes he hears stuff from friends or parents or family or whatever. But he just avoids it because I don't need that. I don't need that distraction. And the other thing that the players tell you almost to a man is that when they meet fans in the streets or in restaurants or whatever, it's always positive. Fans come up, they want a picture, they want an autograph. It's not like fans coming up and saying, you suck, we shouldn't have drafted you.
They don't do that.
They don't do that. And it's people hiding behind, Twitter brings out the worst in people, and it allows the worst people to be really bad.
And that's by the way, that's for everyone, Stu. I'm sure people don't come up to you and tell you how terrible you are. And I know people don't come up to me and tell me how terrible I am. But
on Twitter, exactly. I mean, on Twitter, I get abused all the time, same as you do all the time.
Last night on YouTube, one of the comments was that Tony Marinaro is like the worst interviewer ever. Yeah. I've been doing this for 20 years. I got myself a pretty big following, pretty big indeed, that has followed me wherever I go. I know for a fact that I'm not the worst interviewer ever, but hey, everyone can, they're entitled to Twitter. That's whatever they want.
So I told this with Alex, just stay off social media. Don't look at it. Don't check it out. Fans, from what I've heard, from what the players tell me, fans, when they meet the players in person, sometimes there may be, players would rather have a quiet dinner with their wife and not be bothered. But fans, they say they're polite. They come up for pictures. I mean, Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield's telling me that. Everywhere he goes, people are in. Cole Caulfield's obviously playing very well. But it's the people on Twitter. You can't just lump all Habs fans into the people who are doing it. These are idiots. It's like, when the Canadiens win the Stanley Cup and people riot and smash the windows and rob stuff. It's punks looking for an excuse to do it, right?
Yeah.
And the same with Twitter. It can be a cesspool. So, players, as Mike Matheson said, you worry about what your family thinks, you worry about what your teammates think and what your coaches think, and that's it. And you go home and you do your job and you move on. So that would be my advice. But for Reinbacher, that would be my advice to him too. Just don't look at social media. Don't pay attention to it. Those aren't the real sort of Canadiens fans. And also, you hear from, I know this is when I was sports editor too, you always hear from angry people. You don't hear from people who like what you do.
Yeah, you're right about that.
People wouldn't call up and say, oh, that was a wonderful story you wrote, or that was it. They don't like it, they'll tell you they don't like it. So you got to weigh that in also. But for Reinbacher, for people to take it, we had this discussion with one of my colleagues earlier today. The Canadiens, and we're starting at the top, the passion for the Canadiens in this city has never been higher. Never. And I grew up when they won the Stanley Cup almost every year. I told you 4 of the 5 years I was in high school, they won the Stanley Cup. but it's become like the Canadiens have become like a reality TV show now in Montreal.
Yeah.
It's nonstop. It's 24/7. People talk about the players are everybody knows who they are. They can't walk down the street without being recognized. There's good to that. So many other teams would love to have such a passionate fan base, but there can be a downside to that also. And we saw that yesterday with the draft.
You know what the bad part about that is, Stu?
What's that?
It doesn't reflect well on the city of Montreal because it shows that the city doesn't have a lot to offer.
It really doesn't. And I would have picked Ryan Leonard. Does that mean that Kent Hughes is an idiot because he took Reinbacher? No, Kent Hughes is a really smart hockey guy, and he thought that was the guy they wanted to pick. That's fine. Difference of opinion. As I said, Kent Hughes knows more about hockey than I do, but that was his pick. I would have picked somebody else. That's all. I mean, if you're a fan and you wish they had picked Michkov or Leonard, and again, with every draft, it's such a crapshoot. I was interviewing Craig Button the other day, excuse me, for a column I wrote, and former GM, the scout, now TSN. I said to him, the regular fans have any idea what a crapshoot this is? And he went, no, they really don't. You're trying to predict. Remember fail for nail for Yakupov. Alex Lafreniere was supposed to be a superstar in the NHL. He might still be. He's having a hard time right now. It's a crapshoot. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, Reinbacher could be a total stud, and Michkov could be a bust, or it could be the other way around. You really don't know. I mean, the Connor Bedards of the world and the McDavids and Crosbys are different. But for I tell people this all the time. Go on HockeyDB or go on one of the websites and look at the first round picks for every team from every year, and 80% of the guys you've never heard of.
There's a technical issue, by the way. Every now and then you hear static. I think it might be coming from Stu's mic. I'm not sure. But look, we apologize for that. Stu, now talking about Reinbacher, there are some statistics that will make him look like a stud that maybe he is. And I'd like to welcome to the program Thibaud Chatel, who works analytics for NL Ice Data, Swiss Hockey Stats website. He's there. Thibaud, welcome to the Sick Podcast. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks, Tony, for having me.
You're very, very welcome. Merci beaucoup. Meet Stu Cowan. Stu, meet mon chum, Thibaud.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Is the static on there, Tony? Or you?
I think it's gone. I think it's okay. Thibaud was every time you were talking about David Reinbacher and you were talking about the fact you wanted to choose Ryan Leonard instead. I think it was Thibaud for me that was throwing in a little bit of static there, right? Thibaud, obviously your tweets and some of the data you put up there on social media, on Twitter in particular, have caught my attention. So thank you very much for that. And hence, welcome to the Sick Podcast. Why don't we do this? Because this is what you do. This is not what Stu and I do when it comes to this. I can't speak for Stu, but I'm a dummy when it comes to all this analytic stuff. Okay. So why don't we bring up some charts and maybe you can explain to us what we're seeing. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Best prospects for the National Hockey League. This is some of your tweets. Connor Bedard, David Reinbacher, Matvei Michkov, and Adam Fantilli. Okay. 4 names, obviously, that everyone knows. Bedard went number 1 in the draft. Fantilli went number 3. Reinbacher went number 5. And Michkov went number 7. What is this chart exactly? What are you looking at? And how does Reinbacher fare in this company?
So, Tony, you're starting with the most complicated thing, but that's
story of my life.
That's all right. So this is a prospect projection model. So in this case, we're looking at every hockey players from 16 to 22 years old. We are using the past 3 seasons of data on their performance. And we are looking at the position they play. We are looking at the league they are playing at right now. We are looking at the age they are right now. And we look at the historical comparison from the same players on the same position, same league, same age in the past.
Got it.
And then we look at, on the past 20 years, what those players became after that. So you have that starting point as a comparison, and you compare that player and you see what the other players became after. So based on that, Reinbacher is looking very, very good because he's having an historical season in a top 5 league in the world, the Swiss National League. And he's a defenseman, and he's still young, obviously. And the performances he put up this year, but also last year in the second level, which is also a professional league, and scoring a point per game with the U20 in parallel, makes him in the model a very, very safe bet to become an elite player for the next decade in the NHL.
Wow. Stu, do you have any questions on that? Did you get that, Stu?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of like you, Tony, when it comes to analytics. I try and understand them, but I don't understand them as well as many others, I guess.
All right. So,
but as I said earlier, I mean, there's no doubt David Reinbacher is a heck of a hockey player. I mean, he's top rated defenseman going into the draft by just about everybody.
Yeah, that's something though. You rank him with those prospects, and you take a look at the data in the past couple of seasons and players that have done something like this, and fast forward 20 years to see what it translates to. Okay, let's bring up something else here. Puck management at 5v5. David Reinbacher, who plays for Cloton as a defenseman, talk to us about those numbers and those percentiles.
Okay, so those numbers are from our manual tracking we're doing at Analyze Data. So we're two guys running that Swiss-based company, tracking games in the Swiss National League. We are collecting about 800 events per game. So we're talking zone exit, zone entries, battles, retrievals, shots, shot assist, high danger passes, everything. So Reinbacher, we tracked him over 20 times last year. So this is purely puck management, meaning the battles he was involved in along the board, the puck he could retrieve or not, loose puck in his defensive zone is in the offensive zone. The interesting thing, and also relate on the transition stat, maybe you're going to show that later, Tony, is not that good right now. Those are percentiles. So the 39 puck management in DZ defensive zone you're seeing, meaning if the best defenseman in the league is at 100, is at 39. So not that good, but he's only 18 years old, playing in a very good, very fast league, playing for a bottom of the standing team.
Hold on a sec. Perfect. Is there a red flag here? Because this puck management translates to decision making. Decision making translates to the brain and the ability of the brain to process things quickly to make the right decision with the puck. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Am I onto something, or I'm totally off?
No, I wouldn't say this is a red flag at all. I mean, he's a young player, again, playing for a team that was dominated in their zone most of the time at 5-on-5. The interesting thing is the green boxes that you see, meaning that led to an exit when he was recovering a puck in his defensive zone. He was way above average into transforming that puck into a clean, successful, control breakout. That's interesting. In the offensive zone, same thing. When he was recovering a puck, he was able to manufacturing shots for his team at a very high rate, 88th percentile. That's almost top 10% in the league. And we see the same thing on transition, very clean breakouts, control, successful. When that kid had the puck on his stick, the decision-making, finding the right play, the smart play to do was always there.
What's that 14 number, puck management in the offensive zone? Is that the same thing, that if the highest number is 100, he's at 14?
Yeah, exactly, among defensemen in National League.
Okay, but hold on a second. If the numbers are low of puck management in the defensive zone because he doesn't play for a particularly strong team and they're on the defense a lot, when they're on the offense, his puck management in the offensive zone, does this lead me to believe that he's not a very good offensively skilled player?
No, I think we should not confuse the overall offensive capacities and the fact you are not retrieving a lot of pucks along the boards or loose pucks in the offensive zone. Cloton was a very particular team in the sense that they were bottom of the standings. They were suffering a lot at 5-on-5, and as soon as they got the puck, they were launching rushes and counterattacks. So those were fast, lightning attacks where the defensemen were not involved a lot. That's why Reinbacher doesn't have a lot of zone entries, for instance. He was not involved because those were rushes. And once in the offensive zone, they were cycling a bit, but as soon as they were losing the puck, they were backing up in the neutral zone to avoid getting caught. So No, this is definitely not a red flag from a young player in that league playing for a team that was with a defense first mentality most of the games.
Next. These are players in the Swiss National League. As you can tell there, from ages 18 to 35. That list that's up of about, 12, 14 players or whatever it is. Reinbacher is clearly the youngest player on that list. There are 2 defensemen. The rest are forwards. What is this?
This is the Cloten squad, only Cloten's players. You don't have the full list. This is the top of the table.
Yeah.
So we're back to the basics here. We're talking goals differentials at 5-on-5. Goals for and against when you are on the ice. So like I explained, Cloten, they ended 12 out of 14 teams in terms of expecting goals possession at 5-on-5. They were suffering a lot. They didn't have the roster to compete against the top teams in the league. They were just coming up from the second level that year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and despite that fact, Reinbacher and his teammate on his pair, Kellenberger, they were the only one with a positive goal differential at 5-on-5. So we don't have the number of games played on that chart, but I think Reinbacher played like 40-something games, and over 40-something games, he was on the ice for 33 goals for Cloten and 25 again, so plus 8 differential there. And you see the rest of the team, and you know why you don't see any other defensemen? They're all in the very, very negative. So you can see the differential impact when Reinbacher was on the ice versus the other defensemen of Cloten.
And it's an encouraging stat as well, because he's second on the team only to a 35-year-old who has a ton of experience. So now you have an 18-year-old who's as effective or as close to effective as a 35-year-old who's double his age with double his experience. It's an interesting stat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in analytics, you can look at micro details, right? Like puck battles and retrievals. And then you can take a step back and look at the overall results. And the overall result at 5-on-5 is probably what is your goal differential at the end of the day. Everything else you do on the ice end up with your team scoring goals or your team allowing goals, right? So at the end of the day, everything Reinbacher was doing, everything he was involved into with his teammates when he was on the ice, the impact he had led his team to be much, much better with him on the ice than without him on the ice.
Let's bring up one more model. What are we looking at here?
So that's the draft model. The first one you brought up was the prospect projection, which has a much longer view, right? So the draft model is really forcing the stats at choosing a player on June 28th, 2023, and deciding who is the best right now for the NHL draft. And so on this one, Reinbacher was 6th, behind Bedard, Fantilli, Smith, Michkov, and the top 5 that went out. Carlson.
Yes.
So top defenseman in the draft for sure by a mile.
By a mile.
The next defenseman in the model was, I think, in the 20s something. So,
but let me ask you this: you talked about a top 5 league. Is it safe to say that out of the top 5 leagues, the leagues that he plays in is 5th? Like the Swiss league isn't as strong as a lot of the other leagues. Therefore, it should be easier for him to put up numbers in the Swiss league than it would be if he was playing in Sweden or Finland or in the KHL, would it not?
So the Swiss National League is a very particular case. If you look at the recent numbers, it's probably the 4th best league in the world. You have NHL, KHL, AHL, SHL, and 5th. The Switzerland is maybe right behind Sweden, but ahead of Finland right now. The particular case is that the number of import players you're allowed to have on the ice in Switzerland is limited to 6 players. So every night you can dress up 6 Canadian, Swedish, Finnish, American, whatever players, and you have to have 14 Swiss guys. So what does that mean is that you cannot mess around giving playing time to 18 years old playing more than 5 minutes, because the other factor is that you can be relegated at the end of the season if you're just not playing the game, right? You cannot just take a year off saying we're going to develop guys. No, if you're being relegated to the second level, that's a huge financial blow to your organization, and maybe going to take years to go back up. So the best Swiss young prospects are going to Canada, playing the CHL. So there are basically no Swiss prospects playing in the National League. Reinbacher has a Swiss license, even as an Austrian, so he was not counting against the import license.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot import another 18 years old from Sweden or Finland or whatever, because you cannot mess around, like I explained.
Mm-hmm.
So the case of Reinbacher getting the highest ice time on his team at 5-on-5 at 18 years old is unprecedented. Wow. This is not a development league. This is a league of senior players that play for clear financial and sportive objectives to maintain their organization in a good financial health over the long term. So
I saw a tweet the other day, Thibaud, something to the effect of take Reinbacher's stats, the games that he played, the points he put up, Rasmus Dahlin, Roman Josi back in the day, Moritz Seider. This guy's in that company.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you compare, like the easy thing is to compare Reinbacher to the most recent European defensemen, like Moritz Seider, Jiricek last year, Nemec last year, above them. He's above them.
He's above them.
Is above them. And
Nemec went second last year in the draft to Jersey.
Yes, absolutely. And Jiricek went, 5-6? And he did even better in the AHL this season. And the interesting thing is that they were also playing in non-traditional league, meaning they were not playing in Sweden or Finland. They were playing in their own local country, giving big roles in an unprecedented way. So Reinbacher is really following that model that Seider also was doing in his draft year, playing in the German DEL still. And is above them, is more advanced, absolutely.
Thibaud, in ending, and thanks for all these stats, very enlightening indeed. To all the fans watching right now on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, live on the Sick Podcast, who were underwhelmed with the selection of David Reinbacher, who were hoping that the Canadiens would have tried to go for the home run and Matvei Michkov or another offensive player, to them in ending, you say what exactly? After seeing Reinbacher play, after analyzing his stats, after talking to people about him, after watching him, you say what exactly?
I say, if you have the chance of getting a player you feel is 100% destined to be a cornerstone for your franchise for the next decade, that's going to be on you. That's going to be on your top pair alongside your top offensive defenseman, or managing your second pair and shutting down the best opposition night after night, winning the 5-on-5 battle, playing the top PK minutes, playing your power play second waves. Those are not falling from the trees. I mean, if you decide to take Michkov out of the equation, then who's the best next player at that fifth pick? And to me, I hate the word safe because we use it wrong most of the time in terms of drafting, but between that very secure, mature, I mean, I'm not sure we have ever seen a prospect as mature as Reinbacher is right now as 18. Between that guy and the maybes around the potential of Brian Leonard or Zach Benson or whatever flashy offensive forwards, and given the current state of the Montreal Canadiens organization, I know we like goal scorings, but we also like that number 2 defenseman cornerstone. And number 2 is not a bad thing. You need those. Look at the recent Stanley Cup playoff champions. They were full of those big guys who can skate, who can transition the puck well, who can score on occasions.
What's he missing to be a number 1 defenseman?
I guess that flashiness that you see now in modern hockey, like Kyle McCarr, Adam Fox, Roman Josi, Eric Carlson, is just much more well-rounded. And that means he maybe doesn't have the skills to navigate the blue line like McCarr is doing, but how many of those are there in the world? So that's not his role. I think he's going to be a very, very good elite player on a different role.
When is he going to be wearing a Montreal Canadiens uniform, in your opinion? Besides development camp, and he already took a skate earlier today, and he'll be there between July 1st and July 4th, along with, 36 other players. I think they're going to be 37 in all. When are we going to see him in a Canadiens uniform playing for the Canadiens?
So the thing I've always heard, and that was confirmed, but there are some rumors, obviously, that he wanted to stay in Switzerland next season. He wants to finish his business school. That also shows something about his character and culture and intelligence. So if he does one more year of Switzerland, top hockey, top minutes, getting more freedom maybe from his squads, playing a more offensive hockey, I'm sure Cloten is going to love being showcasing what they can do in terms of developing prospects and maybe attracting future prospects to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
In 2 years, he could be in the NHL. He could have been in the AHL next season without a doubt, for sure. Like Jiricek and Nemec did this season.
You mean? So, for example, in September, he could be in the AHL if he wanted to. In your opinion?
Oh yeah, I mean, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Okay.
The guy is facing night after night in Switzerland. The key import players I've talked about, all those Canadians, Americans, Swedish, Finnish, the top guys he was facing because he was on the shutdown pair. Those are guys that played in the NHL, KHL, top European players, international players, world champions, Olympic champions.
On that note, let's take a look at this tweet. All right. So Craig Button with Jay Onright talking about Reinbacher. Craig Button says, I see him as a really good, solid second pair defenseman. I see him a lot like Adam Larson. He's been a solid NHL player during his NHL career. I think Reinbacher can be exactly the same type of player. To that, Daniel Winnick responds, I don't think this is the right take. I played against him all year in the Swiss League. He already shows poise, hands, and skating ability that are greater than Larson has right now. He's a superior skater who can take shifts over and is playing against men already. There's a former NHLer who plays against Reinbacher who says he's already better than Larson right now.
Yeah.
Don't compare him to Larson.
That's not the first time Dan is taking the defense of Reinbacher this season. I think you can look up for a tweet from him back in January or February, I think, when I published my first draft scouting report or something, and Reinbacher was already top 5, and Dan answered a tweet saying, no, that guy is going to be a cornerstone, franchise cornerstone.
Wow.
Dan is a very smart guy. Talked to him a bunch of times. It was interesting in knowing his stats and learning about analytics on his free time while still playing. So, yeah, I was mentioning the skating ability comparing to Larson for sure, but you can take Dan's word for it.
Thibaud Chatel, thanks so much. Interesting observations. Welcome to the Sick Podcast. The first time, I hope, of several. Thanks again.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right. There you have it, Thibaud Chatel. All right, Stu. It's pretty encouraging, huh?
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. One of the things you brought up, though, is that I almost chuckled about when he was talking about how his team scores more goals when he's on the ice than when he's not. That's sort of plus minus, doesn't it? In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But a lot of interesting stuff there. I mean, as I said, there's no doubt this guy's a good hockey player.
Yeah, and he's going to be at Brassard over the next couple of days as well. Yeah. July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Will I see you down there on Tuesday for the scrimmager?
I will be there. I'll be there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
All right. Okay. In ending, can the Montreal Canadiens stop asking their players to name the draft pick?
Yeah, it hasn't worked out. That Carey Price was, Ken Hughes came to the rescue and said it's the way we planned it, but it wasn't the way they planned it. I mean, Carey apologized afterwards. Kudos to him. He apologized on Twitter. I'm embarrassed by it, obviously. It didn't work out that great when Shea Weber didn't pronounce Cole Caulfield's name properly either in Vancouver.
Yeah.
But Marleau seemed to be able to do it okay for the Sharks when he announced
it's pretty hard to mess up Will Smith, I guess. But
yeah, that's true. Reinbacher's not that hard either. I mean, but whatever. As Ken Hughes said, it happens. I mean, I've been on podcasts like you, and you're trying to remember a guy's name you can't remember. But it was, as I wrote in my column, there's a lot of strange things that happened at the draft for the Canadiens, and that was one of them.
Stu, I'm like you. Complete confidence in this management team from top to bottom. Complete confidence. Nick Bobrov, the more I hear him speak, as a matter of fact, I think he's a really, really smart guy. We don't know much about the draft. All we do is place calls, talk to a few people. But on the surface, drafting 3 goalies, drafting a couple of overage. Mitchell Brown joined me yesterday from EP Ringside and Elite Prospects, and he says he wouldn't be surprised when all is said and done if Reinbacher is the only player they took in the draft that ends up playing in the National Hockey League. I hope he's wrong. I'm sure he hopes he's wrong as well, and hopefully some of the goalies can pan out. Until then, you know what? Only time will tell, right? We'll know a little bit more. We'll know a lot more about 5 years from now.
That's what I say about every draft. People, we're saying so many people are Twitter pretending to be draft experts and whatnot. We don't. Everybody thought, Alex Lafreniere was the best player in the draft and was going to be a star in the NHL, and so far he hasn't been. Nail Yakupov. We can go down the list. There's a lot of guys that just haven't panned out. And a lot of Canadians' first-round picks, Louis LeBlanc, haven't panned out. So it's a crapshoot, and like any trade, any draft, you got to wait 3, 4, 5 years, and then you could. I had somebody saying, "Oh, the Canadians lost the Lehkonen trade." Well, Colorado traded for the present, and they won a Stanley Cup with their Turi Lehkonen, so they got what they wanted. The Canadians traded for the future with Justin Barron. So if Justin Barron develops into being a stud defensive for the Canadians, then both teams might have won the trade. I mean, teams trade for different reasons and different things.
Yeah, for sure. So and if Justin Barron ends up winning a Stanley Cup with the Montreal Canadiens, then they both won the trade. Stu, I got one more question for you, but not before I talk about Murphy Clinic, an aesthetic clinic specializing in medical aesthetic care. They offer permanent laser hair removal as well as a wide range of treatments for skin problems such as acne, rosacea, fine lines, and more. They currently have 2 clinics, one located at Montreal Shop Angus and the second on the North Shore in Terrebonne. They're also opening up soon in Quebec City. Visit murphyclinic.ca or on Instagram at Murphy Clinic. My God, I'm such a professional. Stu, my last question to you is unrestricted free agency opens up in a couple of hours. Do you see the Montreal Canadiens being active in any way, shape, or form?
I don't see them doing anything really. I think they've got so many players already under contract. I'd be shocked if they do anything on Saturday. I think it's going to be very quiet.
It won't take us very long to find out. We'll be monitoring the situation. I'll see you in Brassard in a couple of days, Stu. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, Tony. Take care.
Thanks so much, Stu. Really appreciate it. Once again, special thanks to our partners, to Energy Transportation Group, named by the Financial Times, one of America's fastest growing companies. Check out their career page for available opportunities. The Playground, with over 600 machines and poker tournaments and Playground casino games and daily promotions. Their customer service is absolutely fantastic. And brewed in Quebec, La Bittt at Tibi. Premium ingredients for everyone's taste. Embrace your true nature. Folks, thanks so much for watching tonight at YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Twitter Live. If you haven't subscribed on our YouTube channel yet, please do so. It's absolutely free. If you like it right now. Share it with your friends. Comment sick, S-I-C-K, S-I-C-K, S-I-C-K. If you're going to listen to us on Google, Apple, or Spotify, leave me a 5-star review. It's my way of feeling the love. Thank you very much. For Aniello and Sammy and Juliana, the Cavaleros are in Orlando, Florida, at the Families of SMA Convention. And for Shane Gomo at Master Control, I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaBita.tb, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.